Yep.
So this is the second call of the Ultimate Self-Healing System.
Yay. Woohoo.
Yeah.
So, and in this one, we're going to more talk about module 1, which came out on last Thursday, right? Yeah, because we got module 2 today, but we won't talk about that yet because it's too soon. So were you able to jump into module 1 at all, or how is the intro doing?
So, as far as module 1, I've gotten far as pinpointing timelines and making a note of events that has had an effect or had an influence of some sort. And I've also been playing around with this pendulum of mine, my Ganesh pendulum.
Oh yeah.
And tuning into the body. And so I haven't really there's no deep dive into the first module yet. So, but I've just given it a good read of it.
Perfect. And yeah, you said that you were looking at the meridian charts, and that's awesome because that, for us, we still look at the charts, and there's still little details that we're like, oh yeah, and and on those charts, there's the descriptor of the emotion that is, most commonly referred to in the meridian. And the one that's bolded, like for bladder, would be fear of death.
Yeah.
And I think that's bolded, and that's like the one. If you memorize anything, that's the one to remember, whatever's bolded on the charts.
Okay.
It's always great whenever you're looking at the meridians to think, okay, so if that's bladder and that's fear, how does that feel in my body, and what's my relationship with that area as the meridian runs through the back and down the legs out to the first toe. So really to kind of, it's like that way of learning where you're seeing the stuff. So it's an objective, but also what's the subject? How does that really affect you subjectively?
And then how you said how that feels.
Yeah, and then as the real design of the timeline is to give you areas of your life to reflect on with the week's meridians. So you can kind of go to the timeline and say, okay, was this event, did it affect my bladder or my kidney meridian? Was there fear or humiliation involved with that?
That got stuck.
They got stuck.
Right.
So we're always looking at, how we're affected by, turn that down a little bit. We're always looking at how we're affected when it's out of balance or when it goes out of balance. But there's also the flip side with each one of those. And I think it's also important to realize that that's also in play, and always a possibility is the other side. So like with bladder, fear of death, and then the extreme of that on the other side is being an intense daredevil and not really considering your fate or any danger you might put yourself in.
Hey, Kyla.
Okay.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi.
Kyla, this is Ashwin. Ashwin, this is Kyla.
Hello.
Hi.
And Puppy. Aww. We were just talking about the bladder meridian and fear of death, but then when it's stuck, but then when it's free flowing or sometimes hyped up even, it's that crazy daredevil that will do extreme sports and bungee jumping and all sorts of things. But that also allows you, if you want to jump out of a plane, then you can still do that. Having that bladder meridian flowing so that you can use it to, use that fear to keep yourself safe, but to allow you to have some extreme fun too.
And assess danger as you step into things
Mhm.
that could be put you at risk. It's like that feeling when the hair on the back of your neck stands up. You kind of think, oh, I better pay attention to this. And
Yeah.
that's where that feeling, like when you get too close to the edge and you're,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, you feel that whole thing go around down your back and then up in the front, gives your stomach a certain feeling.
But and it's also that huge important thing of when you're sensing you're walking down the street in New York City and all of a sudden you're like, uh-oh, what's happening? Right? And that's when your bladder meridian is flowing smoothly, then you are well aware of being able to sense perhaps danger and your fear coming up in order to protect you. Right? So that all of the emotions can have the side when it gets stuck that leads to, like for bladder, extreme fear. But on the other side, it leads to, you know, heightened awareness and a heightened intuitive sense that protects you from danger. And like with anger, pushes you forward into action. Right? All of the emotions can have a stuck kind of toxic side, as well as that energizing, you know, hugely important motivating side. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then there's the physiological part of it, where when you're in bladder stress all the time, where you're feeling like, there's something going on, and you're in fear, it also affects your physical organ bladder, and it holds back, and because it's the sphincter in the bladder is held tightly, over time it gets tired, and it'll be difficult to urinate, difficult to hold.
Get urinary tract infections more often.
Urinary tract infections, and because the liver is not getting, so the other thing that the meridians do is they energetically enhance the chi of their host organ. So the bladder is serviced by the bladder meridian as far as energetically flowing. The same with the kidney meridian.
Yeah. So yeah, and fight and flight goes in. So you guys know what fight and flight is? Yes. So leading to adrenal stress, kidney and adrenal stress, when people are always in kind of a hyper vigilant mode.
Yeah.
And this is totally one of the things, if you find yourself in fight and flight a lot, which many, many millions of people on the planet are in on a regular basis, this is the meridians, the meridian pair that you want to work with to be able to calm down, to get into homeostasis, and to be able to achieve that calm equilibrium. Right?
Yeah. And the two of them really work together, whereas the bladder goes down the back and it's fear of death. Then the kidney is this feeling of exposure, where you feel like you're being judged or humiliated, embarrassment and ridicule. And when that energy comes at you and this bladder kidney is out of balance, the adrenals tend to be on call all the time. So that's creating an unhealthy steroid situation where the corticosteroids that are being given off by the adrenals are too much. And so there's a lot of assimilation issues happen then, because when you're in that adrenal stress in fight and flight, it changes the blood pressure. It makes it so you're not digesting food. And it just basically puts you in a heightened state of physical awareness of usually fear, but also sometimes aggression.
Mhm, mhm. Should we run the bladder meridian?
Okay.
All right.
Hey, you want to?
Yeah. Why don't you do?
I'll do the camera.
You do the camera.
Okay.
All right.
You know where it starts, everybody?
So it starts at the brow, and then goes over the head, and then comes down. We're just going to go right down the spine, right through the middle of the glutes, through the low back, through the back of the legs, through the knees. There's a little movement in the knees, and then it goes out to the outside of the ankle to the fourth toes. Sorry, the fifth toe, little toe. Then it comes up from the bottom of the feet and does a circle and comes deep up the middle of the legs. Then there's just a zipper right up. When we get to the rib cage, you have the sternum in the middle, and it goes just off to the sides of the sternum. In between each rib is where each of the kidney points are. So everybody has asked, there we go, let go. So when we run these, when you start, you can take a breath. And the breath is like modulating and asking the body to let go and let the energy flow. We go down the back of the legs, little toes, to the bottom of the feet, take a breath. So I'm going to show you a little trick. People always ask, how do you learn the ankle part? And it's not so important to ankle. I'm going to show you from here. When you come down the kidney meridian, so the way that you can remember this little loop, and it's not super important because your body knows exactly how it works, so it's going to do it correctly no matter what. But when you get here, think of it as there's a loop that hangs down, and you're going to the top of the ankle, and that loop hangs off the ankle, and then you go under the foot. And when you come back, it's from the bottom of the ankle, and that loop hangs off the foot, and you just go the other way. So it's the same, the loop goes in the same direction each way. Does that look like something, a good way to think about it?
Is that possible? Yeah.
That.
Yep.
Right. Bladder and kidney. Whoa.
So what questions about bladder or kidney meridian?
Nothing comes to my mind.
Yeah. I think, I know a lot of people, it's just remembering, okay, if you're getting urinary tract infections, or if you have any kidney issues, or any urinary stuff, then it's like, okay, that's where I go. That's where I start clearing. That's why I look. Is this fear? What's going on? What just happened to create this situation?
And then also anxiety and stress are a big part of bladder and kidney.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like whenever you're going into a situation where you know that there's going to be a lot of stress, it's a great thing to just take a moment, take a few breaths, run your bladder. You can even do it while you're sitting, and you can just allow the energy to go down and then have it come back up. And these top points are very potent.
Yeah, I can feel it.
Remember,
Can feel it.
Yeah, you can feel it. Yeah. And with when you're doing, when you're talking with your body, doing core talk, and your body says, yeah, I want to run the kidney meridian. So we're going to always run it down first. So this is the end of the kidney meridian. And then you'll feel these points many times, especially when your body is specific about wanting to do it. You can feel a little bit of congestion sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good to do a little bit of just some moving that energy there, and then allow it
Because
to
there's
go
a
down.
lot of lymph in there. A lot of lymph glands. I think you can probably feel those little sore spots. I certainly can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How are
She's-
you, Kyla? It's been forever.
I know. I'm good.
So
I'm just
good.
coming straight out of an osteo appointment, so sorry I was a couple minutes late.
Oh, that's all right. You look gorgeous as usual.
Thanks.
Yay. And you said something, I interrupted, Ashwin, sorry.
Oh no, I was just touching those points and it was feeling a little tender.
Yeah, mine too. So that's, that in itself is an absolute sign that this is a good place to work.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're sitting down or you're in a place where you can't go all the way down, can you just do here and then kind of visualize and then kind of land back? Oh, my camera's super high, but land back up here.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I do is kind of this all, and then and you can go halfway down to your knees even without, anybody noticing really, and then fling it down to your toes and kind of bring it back up,
Is it important to visualize going around the ankle, or can you just sort of?
No, you can if you want. Not important. Yeah, all the little parts as you're going down. I mean, there's little zigzags that happen. It's not important to memorize those because your body is absolutely expert at running them all the time. I don't know if we have anywhere in the material we talk about, there's a timeline, a cycle that happens with all the meridians every day. They each get their own 2-hour spot.
It's in the live event. We do that.
It's in the live event. We do that. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it's.
I might have sent that out, but what was I gonna? Oh, that when you're visualizing it, I do like to visualize the total end point with a release of the energy and then coming back up. So that I don't necessarily visualize all the little nooks and crannies of the line, but the release at the end when you're in that situation.
And sometimes you can't do any of it because you're standing in line at the grocery store or whatever, and you just then visualize it, take a breath. The breath as you incorporate using meridians in your daily activities, the breath is the instigator of the flow, and your body is going to get very used to, as long as when you start a meridian, you take a breath, your body is going to start to feel that initiation through your breath that,
Ashwin, you're not frozen, but they are. Are you having the same thing?
Yes. I
Oh.
think yep.
And we
Yeah.
can hear you talking now.
how's that?
Are we unfrozen now?
We lost you for about,
Oh
and
my
you're
gosh.
frozen again.
There, okay.
Oh yeah, we've got funky
Okay, so we're gonna switch again.
stuff.
It's weird.
Yes. Yeah.
We're gonna try and switch our internet channel.
Okay. At
You're
least
so smart.
it's smiling.
Yeah. Oh, now it's good. Now we're good.
Are we
Oh, now we can hear you.
Oh
Yes.
my goodness.
Yeah.
Now we're having country internet.
We paid a lot for this country internet too. I don't know what the heck.
That's why it freezes you on the smiles.
Oh, God.
Yeah, you guys had the perfect freeze. You're like both of you was just screaming, smiling.
Well, there is a God, I suppose. Oh, so what were we? That's very distracting. What I realized is that we kind of jumped into the meat of the kidney and the bladder, but we didn't really talk about an kind of the overview of all the meridians. Would that be helpful to talk about the meridians and the pairs and things like that and what meridians do in general?
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, okay.
All right. So
I
Do you
mean,
want us? Do you want me to refer the notes, or as you talk? Do I need to look at the notes, or?
no, I don't think so.
no, 'cause we'll talk about this almost every time, if for individual meridians, but we'll just do a little meridian introduction, because meridian introduction was in
Module 1.
module 1.
Yeah.
So how the meridians affect the body and their purpose. So their purpose is to bring energy, to bring chi to the organ that they're associated with. So because of that, within the cycle of a 24-hour day, each meridian has a 2-hour focus where your body says, okay, this is the limelight for this meridian. And how it does it, we don't really know, but it has a specific time, and people vary a little bit, but pretty much the circadian rhythm of the day and light is governing how that happens, which is why light and darkness is so important in our world. So a meridian will, like, for example, from 7 to 9 in the morning is stomach meridian. From 9 to 11 is the spleen pancreas. So they're a pair and they follow each other. And we'll talk about pairs of meridians and how they function a little bit as we go along. But it's so interesting that these meridians, they go from pairs that go from the head to the feet, and then from the feet back up to the
Upper body.
to the upper body. So those two, and then in the next 4 hours, 2-hour segments, it'll go to meridians that go out to the hands, and it alternates back and forth. So
Why?
It's the flow, and when you actually look at how they go from, so if we were to look at stomach to spleen, and then when it comes up from spleen, which goes to the side, then it goes to the circulation sex, which goes from the nipple. So it's right in the same area, and now it starts to go out to the hands. You come back up, and we come. Oh, our dog child is very.
Yeah.
He's really
Distracting.
active. So we come up here from these finger ones, and when we get up here, then it goes to bladder. So we'll talk a bunch more about that cycle. So they have an auto cycle that happens every day, and then we can be very specific. They are very specific about that time, and then in that time, I don't know if you can hear our dog in the background. He's running around chasing something. So in that time, they're really focusing on.
We've lost you again.
Let me see what's going on. So let me see. I'm going to change away from our country internet.
Sorry, guys.
California as well?
San Diego?
Oh, yeah. Nice.
All right, we're back.
Sorry about that. Feel
It
like
should be better. I'm using my phone now. Phone is supposed to be obsolete for this, but here we are.
Okay. I have a question.
Yes.
You said 2 hours over the 24-hour duration. You have different meridians are given a different certain window, a 2-hour window.
Yeah.
You said they follow a pattern. And what's the reason that pattern is followed?
Well,
That's what I asked. Why did it go from head to
So-
foot to?
so all
you
of
know,
these things have been ascertained over time
Right.
of people who were able to figure out which one went from what to the other. You know, you asked a question in one of the first sessions that we did. You said, do they associate with the nadis? And it's a little different system. And I just wanted to bring this up.
Huh, I thought it was the same.
It's not. There are 76,000 nadis.
Wow.
And there aren't that many meridian points in the body. But the points that we're talking about in the meridian system are the ones that are really mostly on top of the body. So they're really the surface points. When you start looking at the way that they interact, almost every part of every meridian interacts with all the meridians in every part of the body. So that's kind of the way the nadi system works, is that it's interacting fully, but it has these three central areas that go up the spine. So one goes straight up,
Correct.
one goes left to right, and the other one goes right to left. So those are the three major.
It's like a central column.
It's a
There are
central
Sanskrit
column.
words to it. Yeah,
Yeah.
Pingala. Yeah. So you have the one is like a coil of a snake. Goes.
So you can think a little bit of the meridians are somewhat like that. There's 12 major meridians, and then the ones that really correlate to those three major nadis is the central and governing meridians that go from the base chakra and then go around the head and meet at the top and the bottom of the lip. So that's.
And that are really about core issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the meridians all energize specific organs. They reflect emotions back into the tissues of the body. So when we have an experience, our head creates this situation of how we are experiencing the moment, and then our body, that's taken into the tissues through the meridians. So when something very life-threatening or scary happens, we sense that with our senses, and then it's taken into our tissues through the bladder meridian. And then the other thing that meridians do is they govern muscles. So for example, the bladder meridian governs the muscles that go down the spine and down the back of the legs, and to the spine and then in the lower legs. And they're very specific muscles. So there's a roadmap of exactly what those muscles are. But where it's interesting to, like with bladder and kidney, when kidney comes up the front, so that's about things coming at you, and the kidney governs the upper trapezius and then the deep psoas muscles, which are the stabilizers for the low back to the front of the body. So it's all of that coming at you where people, they do this when things are scary in front of them or there's too much, and then they also get contracted in the waist, and that pulls their pulls their lumbar spine towards the front. So that's kind of those are the three things that meridians do.
And you talked about servicing the organs and
I did. Yeah.
So the other thing when Greg mentioned about the 2-hour intervals for each of the meridians, one of the ways that, or really the big way that we use that, is when people wake up in the middle of the night consistently, say at 2 a.m., then we check our chart and we're like, okay, what meridian is that's running at that time that you're always waking up? And then you look at what issues, you ask your body, okay, what's going on? Is that meridian firing? Say it's bladder.
So gallbladder is 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. and liver is
Liver.
1 a.m. to 3 a.m.
So then we'd look at that. Oh, you're waking up at 2 a.m. Oh, liver meridian. So is there something that's making you angry and that
Angry,
is making
frustrated.
you wake up? And start that conversation with the body, go through, find out when that, started, when that anger started, when that event took place perhaps, or that situation. Go back to that age, clear it through the liver and whatever other meridians. You come back up and you don't wake up at that time anymore. So it's a very handy tool if that is something that's happening with you.
Mm. I mean, I know maybe we haven't gotten to that bridge yet, but I know we have talked about the gallbladder and the liver, which tends to be the areas that meridians that could be the most. It could be the easy culprit for us to have something blocking there. What about lungs? Because I know we touched upon I mean, I got that question because we were touching the sternum,
Mhm.
and like the lungs are very close by. Would lungs mean anything? Will the lungs?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does. The lung meridian starts a little bit more at the side. So lung is about grief. And it's very common for people when they have any type of breathing issues that the lung meridian is involved.
And I think that is in a couple weeks, but so lung is with large intestine, and large intestine also deals with family dissolution, so that you go down lung and back up large intestine. So Pete, we have seen many, many cases where like kids in a family and the parents get divorced and the kids come down with asthma. So we've seen multiple kids in families, suddenly get asthma after a family divorce. And that's because of that, that extreme grief that gets stuck in their lung meridian.
Mm.
So, and asthma is actually something that you can clear up. And myself, I had bronchitis and pneumonia a lot in my teens and in my young adult life from a lot of grief. So that clearing, and when we talk about the clearing, it's like, oh, sometimes I'd clear it like 10 times a day, thinking about different situations, so that it's come to, no, I don't get it twice a year. I rarely get anything anymore like that. So, but it did take some of that running meridians according to different situations, scenarios, and ages.
So does the whole lung grief thing go up into the neck and the throat as well, or is that something totally separate?
That's separate usually, and it's usually a piece of it though. All of these things. So we're kind of talking about how different pairs of meridians work together. That's a good conversation to have, because as we start to learn these individual pairs, then you wonder, well, how did that affect this part of my life? And okay, so if with bladder and kidney, if that was about fear and things that were hard to handle coming at me, what about the sadness? So then you start to think about that. And when you're mentioning about in the neck, then you start thinking, okay, well, was that nurturing?
Stomach and spleen.
Stomach and spleen.
Right.
So then you start to think about the physicality of these things are what are most obvious to people.
Yeah.
So somebody will say, yeah, I have tightness in my neck and tightness in my upper body. So that is where you can really look at the roadmap of how the meridians govern muscles. And you can find, I've wanted to do this for a while, to create a visual graphic that would be the body from the front and the back and the side, with colors for the meridians and in the muscles. I might do that
That's a
by
good idea.
by the live event.
Mm.
So you can look at it and you go, oh, look at, there's the color that I keep seeing in my meridian chart. And there it is in these muscles, and you'll have that association.
Right. So that whole
Right.
stomach and spleen thing, you know, how the stomach goes, you know, here and then down through the throat and over.
Yeah.
And it's like, as soon as you said that, it's like, oh my gosh, well, stomach nurturing, you know, and did you get the nurturing you needed at a certain point? You know?
Right. So even if it's like your throat's being closed off and you can't breathe, it's not the lungs, it's still these muscles. So it's still
It
stomach.
could be.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different when you start getting aspiration involved too. So
Right.
then you get combos.
But that's
Right.
the total hit I got when you said that, was that
Yeah.
it was stomach and spleen.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I have one other question, if I
Yeah.
could, just back to the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
So if there are times in the day when you always have more energy, does that mean that those meridians are really clear and running well?
It could mean that. It's
Yeah.
that would be a great thing to ask your body. When I feel
Right.
great during this time of the day, is that a time? And you can then look at the timeline and ask,
Oh, yeah.
are these meridians super clear? Are these my really good time meridians?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they, have I worked on those, or have I cleared those out? Yeah, that's a great, but just keep asking your body. Are you going to be able to have conversations with your body? Has your pendulum been working for you?
I
Kyle?
actually got a new one that I wanted to ask you guys about because I was super drawn to it, and it's brass, but I don't know I don't know anything about brass pendulums.
Metal
Brass-
is cool.
yeah,
We
metal's
just
good.
started using, in fact, Ashwin, I just mailed Ashwin's, it's a silver one.
Oh,
So yeah, the
perfect.
metal is really awesome because it really has different weights.
Yeah.
So it can really have a strong pull to it. So I didn't know about them either until I got some, and then I was like, oh my gosh, these are cool.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Is it working for you?
It seems to be. I've only just started playing with it, so
Awesome.
I haven't sort of taken them side by side to see who's communicating more clearly.
And they might answer differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Ashwin, you were saying you were using your other pendulum. Is that working for you?
Yeah, it is. Ganesh is responding. He's slow to respond, but now he's
Well, he is all that earth energy.
yeah, very grounding energy. And interesting, you mentioned brass. This is brass, in fact.
Oh.
It's carved out of brass, so it is. It's quite responsive. Again, I'll have to, as I mentioned in the first call, I have to position it a little lower because Ganesh represents the base root chakra. So when I hold it a little below my third chakra, it's quite responsive.
Much better there.
Hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I had an idea, Kyla, when you were talking about an area of your day where you have more energy or feel more enlightened.
Mhm.
So there's also a way to, it's like cross training your meridians. So you can take, and you can do this with any thoughts and feelings also, where when you have that feeling in that time slot, you can really take it in, and you can really be aware of how you feel, and you can tell your brain, I love the way this time of the day feels when I have this energy. I'd like to do this more often.
Oh yeah.
And then you kind of take it in with your breath. So this is a way of creating an energy bank in
Okay.
your brain, because our brain only knows what we focus and put our attention to.
Yeah.
So it's like the more that we take in what we want, and when we have that, to be able to really realize it and take it in very consciously, with our breath and with all of our senses, and then tell our brain, I really like this feeling. And it will kind of go, okay. Then you can even say, and I want to feel this way more often. You'll say, okay, let's, whatever.
And then when you're not feeling that way, you can, and sometimes it's hard to think of this at that point, but it's like, oh, remember how I was feeling then? I want to feel that now. And your body can be like, oh, you know, and bring that more. It's like refreshing a template. You know, you know that feel good template, and then you help place it onto other situations or times or feelings during your day.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's an author who lives over the hill from us, and he's at a place called Spirit Rock. Quite often, it's a really well-known Buddhist retreat center, and he's written many books. But this idea of being able to bank good stuff is a very Buddhist idea, and he talks about it in a book called Buddha Brain. And it's a fantastic book. Rick Hansen. Yeah, that's.
So just a question that you'll be asked in module 1 is whether you're a thinking, a feeling, or a body person. Whether you're in your head a lot, in your body acting things out, or if you're very emotionally based. What do you think? Well, and has it changed?
Emotional. I'm emotional.
A word from Jen.
I've been listening in so that I could be a part of it, but I had to square away some.
Awesome. So glad you're here.
Mhm.
Yay. Jen, Kyla, Jen.
Hi, Kyla.
Nice to meet you.
You.
Okay, Jen's emotional. We got that. Why do you think you're emotional?
Oh, because I'm emotional.
Because you react?
Oh, no. Because maybe you can explain it better.
Yes. So, yeah, I'll tell you. Because Jen is emotional because she leads with her heart. She thinks with her heart in a way that there's not much going on here. It's mostly going on here, which I think is very powerful. And so what happens is, when she's coming from here, pretty much 99.99% of the time, and she interacts with the world, which comes from here.
Yeah.
So she's now able to feel all the feelings and the emotions that sometimes seems to be in dissonance.
Yeah, I'll feel what someone else isn't allowing themselves
to feel.
So that empathetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, feeling. Wow.
On like steroids.
On steroids. Nice. And what about you, Ashwin?
I think I'm a bit of a head person. I'm a bit of a head and a body person, because I'm super sensitive to surroundings, energies of people, and so I tend to get into the head about, is this the right place for me? Should I stay here longer or should I leave? But by the time I'm deliberating and trying to conclude what the best action is, my body is already showing signs of pain. Like, my lower back starts to ache, my neck especially starts to ache, which is a typical, I've learned now, I'm getting better at it, is the energy is too dense or it's getting too overwhelming and I need to retreat.
There you go. Wow, great self-awareness. What about you, Kyla? What do you think?
I think that I'm emotional first because that really drives everything. So I'll react with my emotions. And they're always the first thing to surface if I go into overwhelm. But then I think that I do a lot of thinking as well. So after I've reacted with my emotions, then I'm constantly analyzing everything in my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
And revisiting things, but it's always, the front line is always emotion. So I don't know if that means I'm emotion first then.
I think so.
Feeling, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
If everything else, like if the other ones are secondary.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a lot like that as well, with the thought coming in very strong, you know, with the analyzing it and everything. But then the first thing is that almost gut emotional reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think too, because it's something that I can't control, so I can't suppress it or hide it, that it's just my natural state of being.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I laugh at that because sometimes that gets me in trouble.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. People want, yeah. I guess my specific example is, if I may share, just to see if this is what that means to be the emotional. I was at a coffee shop and there was someone in the group that I'm not friends with her, and I don't care to be friends with her for a couple different reasons. And it was my birthday, and she came up to me to wish me happy birthday. But my emotion around like all the stuff she had going on that I'm just not up for being around, I was like, are you kidding? This is the best birthday ever. Like birthdays are amazing. I love celebrating them. I don't remember exactly what I said. That was the truth. But my deeper truth of me not wanting her around came out, that she was like, oh, are you lying? Like she thought I was lying with what I was saying, even though my energy was actually like reflecting something deeper. But my words were like, that is genuinely how I felt about birthdays. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and she just couldn't, you know, that kind of mismatch of the energies flying, so that she just wasn't able to interpret, which is probably why you don't really care to have her around that much, because you're not on the same wavelength, it sounds like.
Yeah, okay.
To say on kind of a broad, non-specific, you know, way, but that's what it sounds like, the cross purposes almost.
Okay. With
That
that,
actually, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, you go.
I was just going to say, I totally can relate to what you're saying, because even that happens to me, even if I'm talking to my husband. If I'm not resonating, if my energy is somewhere else, or I'm upset about something and I'm trying to communicate something, I'm communicating the energy of the emotion, not the words.
Yes.
Right?
Like as you're saying it, you're like, I'm saying what I mean, but why am I?
Yeah. Yeah, the big message is the emotion that's going out there. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and that's really, actually, you guys totally hit it. The magic of this work is because when stuff gets stuck or is kind of tamped down, then we tend to have this kind of larger than life reaction sometimes to things that, you know, maybe weren't that big of a deal, that kind of straw that breaks the camel's back, but in little pieces. But we maybe overreact a little bit, or make a bigger statement or a slightly different statement, because there's so much in there that wants to come out.
Yeah.
And as you go and clear the emotions around different situations and core issues, then that energy inside starts calming down and subsiding, so that then the reactions are much more in keeping with whatever the situation is. And it makes it easier to then, when there's a big difficult situation, to be more measured as well, right? Because the whole thing is about the equilibrium and being able to be flowing right with the times and what's happening, as opposed to having a lot bursting out.
Yes.
That totally sounds like something that happens to me all the time. And I see it in other people too. When people just say, oh, I'm a crier or I'm an emotional person,
Yes.
you know, and I might be watching a commercial and it'll trigger something and I'll just burst into tears. And it's coming from a place where I know there's like a lot more of that sitting there.
Yes.
And it's going to burst out again when I'm having a conversation, and, you know, different things will awaken it. But I feel like it's accessing something that's stored in this huge vessel inside of me.
Yes. And what is so lovely about that is honoring it
Mm-hmm.
and honoring those feelings. I had a couple, the last couple weeks, I don't know what the stars are doing, but I think it's a little crazy out there. But a lot of stuff is happening. And so there is a lot of this outpouring. And the more that we can honor all of those emotions, however they come up with us, then that allows your body to say, oh, okay, I can do this. I'm allowed to release this. And so you can have these release, 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 you know, instead of the wah. And just noticing also, I wanted to, the crying is one reaction that a lot of people, women have also, but there's the other reaction of that snapping, you know, or
Right.
the hitting back. So those are kind of the two big reactions that
Are they
people,
like two sides of the same coin?
well, one's more fear, one's more anger.
Was it anger, fear?
And they're like this.
So they kind of come from different areas, and I'll interject a little different perspective.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I'm a body and
You're
body
feeling.
and thinking was my kind of background, and as a body and thinking person, so that would mean that at times, and not all body thinking people stuff their emotions, but I did a lot. And because everything just had to be okay, because my mom kept telling me all of my life, don't worry about it, everything's okay, you'll be fine, even when things weren't okay and fine. So I just took on this whole, okay, everything's fine, whatever. But when everything is fine all the time, things that aren't fine, they get stuffed into your body and they make your body hurt.
Yes.
So years ago, when I finally realized what I was doing, I started bringing my breath into releasing all this holding. And I had chronic back issues from 19 until I was like 45, I think 43. And in one day, after years and years of trying to figure it out and practice and breathing, I started getting a spasm in my back, and I took a breath and it went away. And that was the beginning of the release of all that pain. But it was from holding in. So that's the opposite of letting out and crying, or, you know, showing grief or whatever. And what it has allowed is the emotions, now I allow them up and I cry about happy stuff. I cry about sad things too, but I cry really easily about things that are happy and joyful and sweet and loving. And it's that rounding out a little bit where things don't have to be okay. They're never going to be okay all the time. It's just the way it is. Life is, that's the way it is. But to, you know, so that's kind of the opposite side, and where that kind of holding things down is so that they don't explode, because that's not good if all of a sudden you're completely out of control. And I had a number of times in those years where I was holding back, and then things would just get to a certain point where there was so much injustice, so much so many things being done by somebody that was in my sphere, that all of a sudden I'd just blow up. And the blow up would be shaking, anger, but not like volcanics yelling at people. It was still had to be contained. but it was, really uncomfortable. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I really-
so we're going to
Okay,
find,
Wednesday. Go
Go ahead.
ahead.
Oh, we both relate to that.
Yeah.
yeah. So what you find is that as things start to show up and your body starts talking and you become more fluent with how to hear what it's saying, it's going to direct you to the place where you can really take action in your best interest. So that if you feel like the emotions sometime are disregarding what you wish would happen in a moment, that you might be able to look forward and say, okay, here's this feeling where I start to do things that are not in my best interest when I get too emotional. Maybe I can, kind of be able to judge what's happening in this moment and be more balanced. And
What
it's
stood
like,
out for me about your story was you when you said I would see all this injustice happen, I thought the next step of your story was you would explode
so
in
these,
those people, but you said you didn't, and that's what I relate to. Is somewhere someone told me, it's all going to be okay, or there is this Southern hospitality thing where the women have to show that everything is okay.
Yeah.
right.
Southern hospitality. Has nothing to do with hospitality. But the Southern woman persona and etiquette is everything is always wonderful.
Yeah.
And my grandma was like the poster child for the proper Southern woman.
That's a heavy load.
Yeah, she wore a fur coat to the grocery store. She had a grocery store fur coat. Yeah, okay, so that's a good story. So I really relate to, like, I guess I never, in my mind, my ego said, like, my ego's like, you're better than all those people who blow up on people. But that's not true, because I was blown up on myself, making myself sick. Disease, joint pain, chronic fatigue, chronic pain. I've had all sorts of itises since I was 15. So anyway, that was really eye-opening for me. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, and then many times when you do actually blow up, it's at something that doesn't make sense, and it's with somebody that you really trust who would never betray you
Because it's safe.
because it's safe. You
Correct.
mad as you want, nothing's going to happen. They're going to forgive you, and but it's the wrong target.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just one thing before we wrap up. The whole lovely conversation is all around different emotions, different thought patterns, as well as different, we haven't touched so much on belief structures yet, but they are all interwoven. How our emotions come up for us, how we think about those emotions, and the reactions that we have most of the time based on our belief systems. So it's really good to think about those separate, your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs, and how those three different kinds of things are creating your daily life. And there's a little video in there about that in module 1, and it's just an interesting separation of powers thought, is where are these things coming from, and how are each one of them affecting me, because they're all very, very powerful.
Yeah, and then you can use that kind of overview of those three things every time that you look at a new set of meridians. And then you can look at your timeline and see how those emotions fit into your timeline. So that's why in the timeline, really it's as much or as little as you want to do. You just want to have reference points so that you can then say, okay, with these two meridians and these emotions, how did that did that affect this time in my life? And ask your pendulum. It will tell you, yes. Is that a place I should focus on now? Yes.
And we'll get more into the questioning next week for sure.
And a lot of the questions are in the demos, the last part of each module.
So what was the most fun part of the meeting? Any ahas out of it?
Yes. I feel like I got clarity on there's always something wonderful about learning more about yourself. Like when I was experiencing incredible pain throughout my body and I didn't know what it was, I kept going to a doctor until I just wanted an answer. I didn't care what the prognosis was. I just wanted an answer because it would help me move forward. And so you guys, through your story, Greg, helped just me understand how my anger shows up. And instead of like thinking it, I guess in my mind, I made it something else. But now I'm like, oh, here, it's much simpler than what you're making it. Let's move forward. So it's really nice.
And then clearing the meridians completely takes the weight off of it so that you really can be just like, okay, next.
Yes.
Yeah. And it takes the weight off of your body and your organs so it doesn't have to create any dis-ease. So that's the cool part. Thank you.
Bye.
Anybody else?
I had a huge just things came together when we were talking about the throat, and you said that was stomach, and then talking about the being an emotional person, and just thinking about what things I see or I hear or I watch or I interact with that bring up that really strong emotion, because at the same time I'll get really teary, but my throat will get really tight. So I was like, oh, it totally makes sense. It's because it's triggering something about nurturing.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to run my stomach meridian.
Absolutely. And go back and say, oh, did this start at a different age?
Right.
Right? So do your 4 questions. Oh,
Yeah.
did this start at a different age? Is it before I'm 10? Before I'm 5? Get to the age. Is the stomach meridian stuck at that time?
That's when it gets really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that'll take those layers off.
Totally. And I didn't really see it until we were just chatting about it now. And I realized that I always get that same feeling when I'm emotional about something where I'm watching people really connect, or I see some grand gesture of kindness. It's not when I see something that bothers me. It's always something that moves me. Yeah, it's great.
And it actually affects the way our throat works with all the glandular stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see something that really is compelling and looks like a really nurturing thing, you'll actually start to salivate. And you feel these constrictions. It's your body saying, "That's the stuff."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank
So
you,
wonderful having
guys.
you guys here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right. If you have any questions, put it in the Facebook group and we'll see you next week. And Kyla, would Mondays at noon work for you?
I think I could make that work. I'm away a little bit, but yeah, I'll take a look at my calendar.
Is this a better time?
Yeah, just because sometimes if I'm away shooting, it might run into a Monday, but I could potentially make it work if it's better. Is it better for you guys?
No, we're looking at some of the other people in the group that have timing issues.
There's about 8
okay.
that aren't making it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Thanks, you guys.
Okay. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye. Take
Bye.
care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.